So, good morning, everyone. Welcome to lecture 6 of Grid and Cloud Computing. So, last class we have started a subtopic that is performance, security, and energy efficiency. We will continue that discussion, and I hope we will complete by the end of this class. So last class also we discussed about various dimension of scalability. I told about size scalability where we can increase the number as per our requirement, and whenever the requirement is not there, we can reduce to a small number as well. So apart from the last class scalability, there are other dimensions of scalability. One of the scalability is called as application scalability. As you know, some applications are there where the number of servers required is more, and if you see, there are some applications are there where number of servers required is less. For example, if you compare a simple programming to a program that is written for weather forecasting, so both programs are having different applications as well as a different requirement of servers. So based upon that, based upon a particular applications, you have to decide how many servers are required or how many machines are required to complete that work. That's why you have to match the problem size, whatever problem size is given to you, whether it is a big problem or a medium size problem or a small problem. Based upon that, you can increase and decrease the machine size scalability. For example, I require 20 server initially, but after that I have seen there are a lot of people are visiting to my website. So I am increasing 20 server to, let's say, 100 server, right? After some time, there is a downfall for my company. So I don't require 100 servers. Then again, I am back to, let's say, 10 servers. So such type of facility we can do with respect to a particular application, and with respect to the situations also, you can increase the number of servers and you can decrease the servers. So that is one type of scalability. The next scalability is called technology-based scalability. Technology-based scalability is of three types based upon the three aspects, you can say. One is with respect to the time, another is with respect to the space, third one is with respect to the heterogeneity. What do you mean by time? As you know that earlier the computer systems are having, for example, we have Windows 95, Windows 98, or Windows XP. But nowadays we are using Windows 7 and Windows 10, right? So with respect to the the development is going on, and we are using the latest operating system. Similarly, not only it is focusing on the operating system, it is also proceeding on the hardware. Like earlier, we are using 4 KB of floppy disks. Nowadays, we have 2 TB of hard disk. So based upon the time and the generation scalability is there. So motherboard is now changed, power supply is also changed, packaging and cooling system is also changed. So with respect to time, the technology varies. Similarly, if you go for the space aspect, you can also know that energy is a very important factor. I told you, right? Because there are a lot of data centers are there. Each data center having a huge number of servers. So if you see in that case, the energy consumption by the data center is very huge. So in order to reduce it, you have to see this technology aspects of the scalability. So you have to see that whatever things are you are using, that should be portable. Like you know that laptop we are using, laptop is portable, but desktop is not portable. So that whenever you are going some, for example, you want to go to your institute or you want to go to your someone relative's house, you can carry your laptop, but desktop you cannot carry. So technology also improves a lot, that everything is now designed in a portable format. Last one is the heterogeneity. Heterogeneity is based upon the hardware components or software packages. You know that hardwares like hard disks, the RAM size, everything is nowadays changed. Processor is also changed to i3 and i7 processor. And software packages, if you see, earlier we are using, if you are focusing on Microsoft Word, nowadays we have latest Microsoft Word. And if you are using MATLAB software, we have a latest MATLAB 2020 version. So each and every year, there are a lot of developments going on in order to provide good facility to the user. That's why heterogeneity is also important factor based upon the technological scalability. So if you see this particular diagram shows the system scalability. If you see here, One side you have scalability, another side you have multiplicity of operating system. Multiplicity of operating system means now you know that your computer system is having two operating system. One you can install Windows operating system, another you can install Linux operating system. So whenever you switch on your computer system, it will decide whether to go for Windows operating system or the Linux based system. So if you see that multiplicity operating system case, if you go for symmetric multiprocessor, multiplicity is not that much, but scalability aspects also it is not that much, right? So scalability here indicates that number of processors or cores in a system. Like your system's i3, I always refer this example, i3 processor is having two different core. So similarly, if you have to see that how many processors are you are using, if you are using multiple processors, whether multiple processors are having multiple cores or not. So it may happen that you have multiple processors and each and every processor is having one core. So if you see in this particular diagram, as you can see that P2P structure, if you see the P2P structure is dominating other technology like NUMA, cloud, cluster and grid, it is having highest multiplicity operating system as well as highest in terms of scalability. Next to P2P system, we have grid system. Next to grid system, we have cluster system. The next to cluster system is cloud, and next to is the NUMA system. So here this graph indicates that how many operating systems you are using in a particular system and how many processors or cores you are placed in a particular computer system. So this statistics is based upon the 2010 analysis. Now coming to the important this particular figure, if you see it also it focuses on the scalability versus operating system image count. Where if you see x-axis represent the multiplicity of operating system and y-axis represent the scalability of the system. So scalability always tries to achieve higher speed by adding more and more processors or more and more servers. So you can expand, right? Whenever you are launching, for example, if you concentrate on Flipkart in 2010, Flipkart is not that much popular. So whenever we are purchasing a particular book or particular item from Flipkart, so we are not that much believing the Flipkart. But nowadays, within a decade from 2010 to 2020, now people are habituated with the products of Flipkart. Now, whenever we are purchasing a particular product, our friends, our relatives are also suggesting why not you purchase this thing from the Flipkart. Why to go to the market and maybe the market will give you that product in a higher amount, higher price. But if you go to Flipkart, you will get in a reasonable price. So day by day, whatever new companies, online shoppings are also popular, and people are heading towards online marketing. So you have to increase the number of servers by applying the concept of scalability. So whenever you are talking about the operating system images, I mentioned you that Windows we are installing, Linux we are inserting, or early days we are using Unix operating system. So whenever you go for symmetric multiprocessor server, SMP server, you will see that SMP server supports a single system image. I told you single system image makes a illusion to the user that the entire system is looking like a single computer system. So if you go for the NUMA architecture, that is called as non-uniform memory access architecture, NUMA architecture is that much capable, it can run multiple operating systems at the same time. For example, if you see a particular NUMA processors having 2048 processors, imagine our computer systems having only one processor, but NUMA is having 2048 processors and running 32 operating systems, 32 symmetric multiprocessor operating systems at the same time. So imagine what is the power of the distributed system, how much work you can execute very easily in the distributed system. Next, based upon this efficiency and performance of the system, there are some laws are there. I will tell you maybe this laws it is covered in a computer organization, but as a part of this course, I am planning to cover it again so that you will get the details about the distributed system or parallel system. The first law we'll discuss that is called Amdahl's law. If you go for Amdahl's law will compare the performance of a computer system if the computer system is a uniprocessor system or the computer system is a parallelized system. Now we'll compare the performance. What is the meaning of this particular thing? For example, if you have a computer system, and imagine first case, you can execute the work of a single user at a particular point of time. So that computer is called as your uniprocessor system. It is a single processor, so it can execute only one user's work at the same time. But imagine another computer systems where you have multiple users as well as multiple multiprocessors or multi-core architecture in which multiple users can execute their work at the same time, because you have multiple processors. So one processor you can dedicate to user number one, another you can give to user number two, another you can give to user number three. In this manner, you can distribute the work so that the user can get the details, user can execute their work simultaneously. So what Amdahl's law says that it is saying that given a program is given to you on a uniprocessor workstation. It may be a workstation, it may be a server, it may be your personal computer, it may be your laptop, it may be your desktop, whatever may be, with a total execution time of T minutes. If you are assigning a work to a single processor system, a uniprocessor system, the execution time required by a uniprocessor system is T minutes. So T minutes, maybe T is equal to 5 minutes. If a work is assigned to this particular computer system, this computer system finishes the work of this particular person in T minutes. So it may happen that the program, whatever you are giving, it may be a serial program or it may be a parallelized program as well. I already mentioned you, whenever you are writing C is equal to A plus B, and you are writing, let's say, the next statement as D is equal to A minus B. This is, let's say, this is one program. Another program you are writing in which you are mentioning C is equal to A plus B, and in the second statement you are mentioning D is equal to, let's say, C minus B, C minus B. So if you see these two program number one and program number two, just I would like to mention here that here the data you should give, that is A value you have to give, you have to give the value of B, then only you can calculate the value of C. So in these instructions also you have to give the value of A as well as the value of B in order to calculate the instruction, the value of D. So these two statements can be run parallelly because they require the data A and B. So if you have a two-core processor, you can execute the calculation of C here and execution of D here. But if you come to the second program, the second instruction is depending upon the first instructions. The first instruction value should be supplied here, then only we'll subtract C minus B, we'll calculate C minus B, and we'll calculate the value of D, and we'll return to the particular user. So in this case, even if you have a multi-core processor, so what will happen whenever you are executing C, you cannot execute D because D is not parallelizable. So whatever program you are giving, that you have to make sure that that program can be parallelizable so that the multiple works can be done at the simultaneously. So in this law, in order to illustrate this law, I have taken an assumption. The assumption is that a fraction alpha of the code must be executed sequentially. So whatever code you have written in a particular program, we assume that alpha amount of work is need to execute sequentially. Sequentially means, as you can see in the program number 2, the instructions are executed sequentially. But in the first program, the execution can be done parallelly. So we are assuming that alpha code in a particular program, alpha set of code need to be executed sequentially. Rest code can be done parallelly. For example, if I take the entire code as 1, then I can say 1 minus alpha code can be done parallelly. So it is saying 1 minus alpha of the code can be compiled for parallel execution. But alpha code is restricted to only sequential execution. Next is that assume that you know that in sequential processors you have a uniprocessor system. So in order to execute this alpha set of instructions, you have exactly one processor, that is called as your uniprocessor system. But in order to execute 1 minus alpha, you are going for parallel execution. So I am giving n number of processors where n is greater than 1. So if I calculate the total execution work, then I will say this sequential instruction will execute for t minute, that is nothing but alpha into t, and these parallel program can execute for n minute. So I am right, sorry, parallel, this 1 minus alpha code is running for t minute, so I can say 1 minus alpha into t. But here we have n number of processors, so whatever work you will carry out by the help of 1 minus alpha into t, it will be divided among n number of processors. So the total execution you can calculate, that is alpha t is for the sequential one, for the parallel case 1 minus alpha among alpha into t, but as you have n processors, you are dividing this work among the n processors. Next is that, for example, here in this case, in Amdahl's law case, we assume that the communication between two different core, if you have two core processor or two different processors, we assume that the communication time from one processor to another processor is ignored. We are not assuming that this communication is stated as 0. So similarly, if there is an input output requirement is there, for example, while you are executing addition of two number program, it is asking you enter two number. So you are entering two number by the help of keyboard. Such type of things are called as input and output operations. Or you are giving a print command so that computer printer, the printer which is attached to your computer is printing your file. So if you see such IO times or exceptional handling, if there is some error, we have not included in the Amdahl's law. We assume that these things can be ignored, or you can say these things are stressed to 0. That's why we have ignored in the Amdahl's law. Now, if you want to calculate the speed of factor says that if you want to execute a set of instructions in a computer system, if that computer system is a uniprocessor system or the computer system is a parallel processor system, if you compare the performance of a uniprocessor system with a parallel processor system, you will get something called speed of factor. So speed of factor of using n processor system, as I mentioned already, uniprocessor system having one processor, parallel processor is having n processor. So if you see here of using n processor system over a use of a single processor, then speed up can be calculated as whatever you have calculated in the previous page, that is alpha t into 1 minus alpha t divided by n. Note that this alpha t is for the uniprocessor system, 1 minus alpha t divided by n is for the parallel processor system. As we are calculating with respect to t minute, I am dividing t divided by this whole quantity. So if you divide it, if you simplify this equation, then t will be cancelled out from the numerator, t will be cancelled out from the denominator, which leads to 1 divided by alpha plus 1 minus alpha divided by n. So this is called as the speed of the speed of according to the Amdahl's law. So there is a sequential bottleneck. I told you already, if you want to use alpha set of codes sequentially, it is taking alpha t time. So if you assume that alpha is equal to 0, alpha is equal to 0 says that there is no code in your program, no code in your program that is sequential. No code available in your program is sequential. All the instructions are parallelizable. If you assume that all the codes are parallelizable, and if you can assume that this n number, n is nothing but the number of processors available in a computer system to execute the work. If you assume, if you concentrate on the cluster or grid or cloud, this n value is very huge. That's why we are representing this value by infinity. So if you see this part is your infinity, this part is your infinity, this total equation can be relaxed to only 1 by alpha. So s, this speed of factor s is now relaxed to only 1 by alpha, as we have assumed n is a very big number, n is it tends to infinity. So if you divide a particular number, let's say I am dividing 1 by 1 billion, suppose I am dividing, the value is 0.00000, a very small quantity which can be ignored. In the similar sense, we have ignored this part and we are saying this equation is equivalent to 1 by alpha. So that is called as your upper bound as S is approaches to 1 by alpha. So surprisingly, if you see this particular analysis, this upper bound is independent of the cluster size n. As n is very huge, so we are not depending on n whenever you are calculating the speed of factor. So this is the demerits with respect to the Amdahl's law. For example, I will tell you an illustration. For example, I want to calculate the maximum speed of a particular computer system by taking alpha value as 0.25 and 1 minus alpha value as 0.75, and n value I will vary from a single computer system to 100 computer system. As you know, the speed of formula I mentioned in the previous slide, that is equal to S is equal to 1 divided by alpha plus 1 minus alpha divided by n. So in this equation, alpha value is given to you. Alpha is nothing but your 0.25, and this alpha 1 minus alpha part is also mentioned as 0.75, or you can write 1 minus 0.25, which is nothing but your 0.75. Let us take n value as equal to 1. I am dealing with only one system. That's why I am dividing n. I am taking n value as 1. If you calculate it, 1 divided by 0.25 plus 1 minus 0.25 or 0.75 divided by 1, you will get a maximum speed of 1. So if you have a one computer system, then you can achieve a speed of factor of 1. But if you see the next case, n value is now 100. If you take n value as 100, but alpha value is stated as 0.25, 1 minus alpha is again 1 minus 0.25 or 0.75. But here the n value is 1, but here I have taken n value as 100. If I calculate, so my speed of factor is coming 3.88. If I take seal of 3.88, because number of processors cannot be 3.88, that's why I'm taking ceiling function, so I will get the value as 4. So imagine here you have two observations with respect to the Amdahl's law. First observation is there is a sequential bottleneck. If your program is serializable, but not parallel, not supporting parallel execution, then it will cause a problem. That's why sequential bottleneck should be as small as possible. You have to write the program using MPI, not using C++. You have to use MPI, like I told you about matrix multiplication example. So if you are using MPI program, you can do such type of parallelism. Second observation is that increasing the cluster size from one computer to 100 computer may not result a good speed up, because you have seen in a single computer system you are getting a speed up of 1. However, you have 100 computer systems, but the speed up is not increased drastically, but it is increased to only a small amount, that is 4. 3.88, or that ceiling of 3.88 is 4. So these are the two observations you can carry out with respect to the Amdahl's law. Now, with respect to this example, I will give a question. So you try to solve this particular question as a part of our polling. So I am giving 2 minutes of time. Please solve this question. Here it is given. I am giving these references as well. Here it is given as alpha value is 0.5 instead of 0.25, and 1 minus alpha value is again 0.5, and you have given n value as 100. So you calculate the value using this particular formula and calculate the speed of factor. Please calculate. After that, you press the poll answers. Don't arbitrarily press the options. Okay. Please calculate it. The formula again I am typing here: 1 by alpha plus 1 minus alpha divided by n. So alpha value is given here as 0.5, n value is given as 100, and you have to calculate S is equal to 1 by alpha plus 1 minus alpha divided by n using Amdahl's law. Can anybody answer what is the correct answer? Can anybody answer what is the correct answer? What is the correct answer? Can anybody?
1.98.
1.98, that is the correct answer, because if you calculate 1 divided by 0.5 plus 1 minus 0.5 is also 0.5 divided by 100, you will get the value as 1.98. So such type of things are very much important. The maximum people have successfully answered 1.98 is the correct answer. Okay. So in order to avoid the observations whatever you have seen in Amdahl's law, there is another law is discovered after that is based upon the problem with fixed workload. So Amdahl's law focus on the fixed workload speed up, that is the problems whatever we have seen, that is called a sequentially bottleneck, and speed up is not increasing drastically. So in order to avoid this, we are going for to execute a fixed workload on n processors. Parallel processing may lead to a system efficiency. As you can calculate, for example, I can calculate the parallel processing system efficiency. E can be calculated as your speed of whatever you have calculated divided by n. And you know speed of is nothing but 1 by alpha plus 1 minus alpha divided by n. So this is your speed of factor. Now you have to divide by n again. So if you calculate this one, then you will get E efficiency of the system, which is nothing but S divided by n. You know the S in the using Amdahl's law, divided by n will result 1 divided by alpha n plus 1 minus alpha. For example, if you take n value as 256 nodes, so it will be calculated if you go for the previous calculations. 1 by 0.25 is your alpha value, 0.75 is nothing but your 1 minus alpha value, and the number of nodes is 256. If you calculate it, you will get an efficiency of only 1.5%. So imagine out of 100%, your efficiency of the system is only 1.5%. So the main reason behind that, whatever results you have seen that the result with respect to, let's say, 4 processors are only kept busy, but out of 256 processors, the speed of factor is only 4. It assumes that 4 processors out of these 250 processors are busy. Rest processors, that is 256 minus 4, that is equal to 252. 252 processors are completely idle. They are not doing any work. That's why the system efficiency is only 1.5%. So in order to avoid this, we are using Gustafson law in 1988, which is focused on the scaled workload speed up instead of the fixed workload speed up. So here we assume that the W is nothing but the workload. If you are going for an n processor systems, so you can write the formula W days, that is nothing but the user scales the workload to W days is nothing but alpha W, and 1 minus alpha into NW. So here W is nothing but your workload of a particular program, N is nothing but your processor, alpha instructions need to be executed serially, but 1 minus alpha instruction need to be executed parallelly. So only the parallelizable portion of the workload is scaled n times in the second term. As you can see, this is a sequential part, as I mentioned previously also, and this part is your parallel system. That's why n is attached to the second term, n is not attached to the first term, because you know that n value is equal to 1 in unit processor system, but n value may be any value. It is maybe tends to infinite in a parallel processing system. So here W days is nothing but a sequential execution time on a single processor system. Then we'll compare the same thing with a parallel system. So if you calculate this S days, that is the speed of factor, if you calculate here, which is nothing but W days divided by W. W days, you know that is alpha W plus 1 minus alpha into NW in the top equation, which is now divided by the total workload W. If you divide this again, you are getting alpha plus 1 minus alpha into N. So by fixing the parallel execution time at workload level W, the efficiency of the system. You can calculate efficiency. We have calculated in the previous slide. Efficiency is nothing but the speed up divided by n. Here we are getting the speed up is alpha plus 1, alpha plus 1 minus alpha, 1 minus alpha into n divided by n, so that I will get the value as alpha by n and 1 minus alpha. So if you are using Gustafson's law, where we are considering about the scaled workload, you will use this particular formula in order to calculate the efficiency of a particular system. So if you concentrate on 256 node cluster, so you know that your efficiency E days is nothing but alpha divided by n plus 1 minus alpha. If you see the alpha value is 0.25, n is nothing but given as 256 node, so I am writing 256 plus 1 minus alpha is your 0.75, which results 0.751. So here the efficiency is increased to 75%. 0.751 is nothing but 75.1%. So in comparison to the Amdahl's law, the Gustafson's law is working good in the scaled workload speed of factor. So if there is a fixed workload in the program, you can go for Amdahl's law, but whenever there is a scaled problem, you can go for Gustafson's law. Now I will give you a small example, a small illustration. For example, if n value is given as 1000, means in a particular cluster or a particular grid or particular cloud, assume that the number of nodes is 1000. So you apply Gustafson's law to calculate E dash. So I am giving 1 minute of time. You take the same alpha value as 0.25 and n value as 1000 and calculate the value of E dash. Quickly, you please calculate within 1 minute. How much you are getting? How much you are getting? Can anybody respond?
0.75.
0.75, yes.
75.
So as you can see also that the speed of gives a particular thing, particular observation, that you have to ensure that, for example, you are dealing with a single node or you are dealing with a 256 node. If you are dealing with 1000 node, you have to ensure that whatever time required for single system, that should be less in 256 system, that should be more and more less in comparison to whenever you are using 1000 system. Otherwise there is no need to go for 1000 systems or 256 system. A small system can work better for a particular computer program. Now coming to the fault tolerance and system availability factor, as you know that I used to give an example of IRCTC. You know, in IRCTC website is down for 1 hour in each 24 hours. Especially if you see IRCTC website is down from night 11:30 to night 0030. So the availability of the system is only 23 hours per day. So if you see, we have to achieve high availability, whether it is a cluster or grid computing system, so that user will get uninterrupted service. If the service is available for 24/7, then you will say that the system is a high availability system. In order to calculate the high availability of the system, you have to first calculate two parameters, that is called as MTTF. MTTF stands for mean time to failure. Mean time to failure says that if a failure occurred this particular time, if a failure occurred in this particular time, the second fault, first fault done at this particular time, second fault done at this particular time, what is the mean time to failure, right? So if the distance between two successive failure can be said to be mean time between two failure. That is called as MTBF. So mean time to failure is that, for example, I am starting a particular computer system here, and after working for 23 hours, it is failed. So that is called is your MTTF. So another thing is that if a system is failed, how much time is required to repair the system? That is called as your MTTR. For example, whenever there is a fault number 1, we can start the system here. So after 5 minutes of failure, I can recover that system. So that can be treated as the mean time to repair. So you have to ensure that there should be a long mean time to failure. That indicates that whenever you start a particular computer system, whenever the first failure occurred, so that the distance should be as long as possible. But whenever there is a failure occurred, the time required to recover the system should be as minimum as possible. That is called as your MTTR. So based upon these two values, I can calculate the system availability. System availability is nothing but MTTF divided by MTTF plus MTTR. So there may be a single point failure, like I told you. For example, if you consider a start topology in which, let's say, 4 nodes are connected, if the hub or the switch is failed, then the entire node is collapsed. So that can be considered a single point failure. So it may happen that in a particular network, a fail may be occurred in multiple places as well. And the rule of thumb says that dependable computer system with no single point of failure. So you have to design a particular computer system in which there should not be a single point failure. So if there is a single point failure, the entire network will be collapsed. That's why rule of thumb says that you should not design any kind of computer system that is having a single point of failure. So if you go for the cluster system, cluster is providing high availability with failover capability. Failover capability says that if a particular hub is failed, immediately another hub will be there in the backup position. It will be come into picture so that the entire network will not be collapsed. So this is the comparison in which you can see estimated system availability by system size, common configuration in 2010. One side x-axis represents the system size. So you know that symmetric multiprocessor is having small system size, but whenever you go for the P2P system, the number of processors cores are very large. Similarly, system availability you can calculate from 0% to 100%. Like IRCTC website, you can calculate 1 hour it is down out of 24 hours. So 23 hours, it means that 23 hours it is available out of 24 hours. So if you do this calculation 23 into 24 multiplied by 100, you can say the availability of the IRCTC system is that much percent. That is called as the system availability of IRCTC. So similarly, if you see the availability, highest availability is the grid system. Next to the grid system is the cluster system, then cloud or MPP, that is massively parallel processor, then the NUMA system, and then the SMP systems. So similarly, you can see you can compare any type of architecture, whatever used in the distributed computing, in terms of their system size and system availability. Then there is an important security aspects in our computer system also. You know that there are new types of viruses are coming, or new types of threats are coming, new types of worms are coming, which is threat to our computer system. Similarly, it is threat to our network system as well. So if you go for such systems, so there should be a network thread. For example, you have a cluster system in which, let's say, 100 machines are there. Somebody injected some kind of virus in the system. It will affect the entire system. So it may lead to the worm epidemic also. Now COVID is also going on. COVID is called as a pandemic. Epidemic refers to a small region, but pandemic refers to whole over the world. So similarly, this worm can result to a epidemic scenario in a particular computer system, which will lead to loss of $1 billion. So you will also see here that whatever the confidential information will be there inside the 100 computer systems, that can be accessed by a hacker. So you will result the information leak. Whatever, for example, one particular subject question paper is available in this cluster, that question paper can be easily get by the hacker. So it will lose the confidentiality of the question paper. It will also lose the integrity of the system, because one person can alter anything. For example, a virus can be injected into a computer system so that whatever user want to do, that user want to run a particular program, that will be not run in that particular program. So the hacker can inject some kind of virus into the computer system so that you cannot do anything. So like that, if you know that one of the popular virus that is called as Trojan horse. Similarly, if you see or if you scan your computer system, if you are not, if you are injecting some pen drive as well as some, you are accessing some internet very frequently through your laptop, you will see most of that time we are identifying Trojan horse virus. So you have to ensure that even if there is a Trojan virus is there, your firewall system or your antivirus system should delete such type of virus so that integrity should not be violated. If you will not do, then what will happen? It will lead to some kind of attacks. So your system will not respond properly or your system efficiency will be degraded. Similarly, if you see that denial of service is a very popular attack. Denial of service says that, for example, in a computer system, I want to access google.com website, and google.com website I want to access. For example, I have written a written a particular program. If you run that program consists of a for loop. That for loop will run for 1000 times. In each time, it will open a new tab and it will search google.com. So in a single computer system, within a fraction of a second, your program will open 1000 google.com web page, which is called as your denial of service attack. So after accessing from a single system to 1000 pages of Google, the Google server will be slowed down so that any authorized user want to access the google.com, he will not able to do it. But Google has such security policies. If a single computer system is accessing 1000 times google.com, then it will block that particular user, or it will assume that there is a attack from that particular computer system, so it will take any preventive step in order to avoid it. Similarly, lack of authentications or lack of authorizations. Authorization says that instead of a single, for example, there is a parcel coming from Flipkart, you are not present at Warangal, so you told your friend to collect that particular parcel. So that is called as your authorization. So if you are giving authorization to another person, so you have to ensure that it may lead to attack as well. Because that person, if it is that person is not genuine, he may share your things with other persons, which is a hacker who can get your data and apply some kind of attack. So these are the issues with respect to the threats to the systems and network. So you have to ensure that there are 3 security requirements what we have discussed here: the confidentiality, integrity, as well as the availability of system should not be compromised at any cost. So this figure shows the complete history of the security approaches. Like I told you about the confidentiality. Confidentiality focus on the information leakage. It is saying that there should not be any information leakage in the system. Loss of integrity. You should not violate any type of constraint. Availability says that you should not apply denial of service attack. If denial of service attack is there, then you have to overcome it. Similarly, here you see that improper authentication. Somebody is accessing your Gmail, somebody is accessing your Facebook account because he has your username as well as your password. So improper authentication should be avoided. So based on that, various factors are there, like Trojan horse is there, we discussed. DOS attack is also there. No authorization, nobody is authorized, but he is able to access the system. Such types of theft or such type of loss can happen to a particular network system. Similarly, you know that, for example, you purchased a particular antivirus system. Let's say you purchased Quick Hill antivirus. Then what happened? Your friend asked that you give me the Quick Hill antivirus so that I will install the Quick Hill in my computer system. That is called as collusive piracy. So one paid client you have purchased, so you are a paid client, you are called as colluders, illegally share the copyright. That quick help is only for one user, but you are sharing with your friend. So you are illegally sharing the copyright content with your unpaid client, that is your friend, that is called as pirates. So such type of things also you have to block, so that the other means the people who are not genuine, they should not use the quick hull antivirus. So similarly, you have to detect the pirates in the network system by using a identity based signature or timestamp based tokens. Nowadays, if you go to any store, the store is attached with a fingerprint machine. By giving fingerprint, you can purchase a particular SIM card. So that is called as your identity based signature. The database also previously contained your fingerprint, so that using that fingerprint authentication can be done. Similarly, there is a system defense technology also there. There are three generations of technology we have seen in the last few decades. First says that we have to prevent and avoid any kind of virus or intrusion. If any kind of people, any kind of unauthorized people want to access a computer systems, we have to prevent it or we have to avoid it. For which we are using various tokens, like OTP is coming for any banking transactions, or we can apply any kind of cryptographic system, that is maybe encryption and decryption mechanism you can use. Second type of generation focuses on detect these viruses in a timely manner. You have to scan your computer system by installing a particular virus. You can scan your computer systems and you have to identify your virus, right? And you have to delete such virus. You can do by the help of your firewall mechanism. Every computer is having a firewall mechanism, or you can go for intrusion detection systems, or you can go for public key infrastructure. Third types of system says that the system should be that much intelligent, it will give response to the particular intrusion. That is called intelligent response to the intrusion. So we have seen there are three different generations with respect to the system defense technologies. So coming back to the data protections. So data protection, I told you about there are three types of services. One is go for infrastructure as a service. If you go for infrastructure as a service, user should ensure that his username and password should not be given to others. That is called as the confidentiality of the system. And cloud service provider should ensure that that system should be integrity. It should maintain the integrity of providing the service. The provider should not violate any kind of integrity while providing services to the user. Similarly, if you see the platform as a service or software as a service, here the provider or the service provider or only the provider or the user should ensure that there should be an integrity in the system and there should be any confidentiality in the system. So now we'll see the last part of the this particular module, that is called your energy efficiency of the system. I told you that if you consider in this example, energy consumption is a major issue in the server and HPC systems, because we have so many data centers as well as we have so many servers. So if you see, distributed power management plays an important role in energy efficiency. If you take a particular example, let me deal with this Earth simulator. In Earth simulator, let 12
It's break
megawatts.
time.
Just a minute, okay? I will cover this particular part. So Earth simulator, if you concentrate on the Earth simulator, for example, Earth simulator is taking 12 megawatts of power, megawatts of peak power. So if you see that we are using 100 megawatt of peak power, then you can see that 12 megawatt watt into this 100 megawatt, that is using the petaflop system is using 100 megawatt of peak power. So if you calculate the approximate price is 100 per megawatt, as it is 12 megawatt in Earth simulator, you have to give $1200 per hour. Similarly, in the petaflop systems, you have to give $10,000 per hour. So if you see how much energy we are purchasing per hour basis. So if you can design an energy efficiency system, then this cost can be drastically reduced. So next class we will start from this particular slide, that is energy consumption of unused servers.